After a variety of numerous changes that have happened to the Ubereats platform, it's made many carriers question, is it still worth it to deliver for this said company in question? So Uber started out as a rideshare company, but has expanded into the area of food delivery. But because of the recent changes, it has people wondering, what do they have up their sleeve? How did we get here? And is it even worth it? Today we're going to take a deep look at what Ubereats is, what it was, and how it came to be what it is today. My name is Elijah, and welcome to Ubereats 2018. A lot of people have a problem with the changes Uber has enacted today, but in order to figure out where we are today, we have to look at where the company started. Uber was originally started as a rideshare company, capitalizing off the complaints from the taxi industry, ranging from always feeling obligated to tip to not having a driver available, all kinds of complaints. Now, at the time, I don't think they ever had the intent of moving into the food delivery industry, but nevertheless, they saw opportunity and decided to seize it. But you can probably imagine that the culture of not tipping doesn't really fit well in the food delivery industry, since it's a pretty much known fact that carriers make most of their money through tipping. To make up for this problem, Ubereats was designed as a curbside business. That means that obviously there was no tipping involved unless the customer would tip you cash. But the expected was they would come down, meet you at your car, just grab their food, and go back to their house and enjoy their dinner or lunch. There was no us going to the customer. That wasn't in the equation because it was a curbside service. And it started out this way because even the people at Uber already knew that, well, if these cats aren't getting tipped, then we got to do something to balance the equation. And for the longest time, that was a balancing equation. If you're not getting tipped, you're also not exactly going, up 30-story buildings. So it may not be that huge of a deal since you're not putting in as much effort to get the set result. Now, originally that was working until Ubereats started expanding, and with that expansion, warranted certain expectations from customers that they wanted to fill. Due to this expansion, this required Ubereats to think about more things from the customer perspective instead of just coming up with a dynamic which is just more or less something just to capitalize off the industry, since the expansion took such a big means. And here it comes where we enter the tactics used by Ubereats on the customer end to expand and retain their customer base. With the expansion into multiple markets, Ubereats started to circle with service on the customer end around a time guarantee and being the cheapest among all the apps, price-wise. The time guarantee is the time limit that a restaurant has to finish the food and before it's dispatched for a carrier to pick it up and get it to the customer. So on the customer app, you see it's guaranteed within 30 minutes. It's guaranteed between 30 and 40 minutes. It's guaranteed between 15 and 25 minutes. Whatever the circumstance is, based on those factors, it spits out a number that they will get their food within a certain time frame. That became the main focus on the customer end, which allowed Ubereats to slowly pick up market share from other apps such as Grubhub, DoorDash, Postmates, just to name a few. But when enacting these tactics, since they focused on customer service, some changes had to be made. They slowly started transitioning out of the curbside structure that we talked about before into the we need to bring the food to the customer scenario. And you can imagine that this scenario wasn't most favored by carriers because at the particular time, this tipping was still going on, or rather was not going on. There was no tipping in the platform, and customers could tip in cash. Well, what if they didn't have it? And since the platform itself didn't necessarily encourage tips, there would be a large number of people who didn't tip. So you can see how that would bump heads with a lot of the carriers because Now, instead of just waiting in the car, you had to go up these 30-story buildings or house or whatever it is and bring the food directly to the customer. Now, regardless of how you look at it, that is a downside for the carrier, because how it was set up before, if the customer didn't meet you outside, you could literally just wait the awaited time, cancel the order, and still be paid. No trouble at all. It was a curbside service. But with this transition, it started to irritate carriers because they had to go up here and do this work without necessarily any kind of payoff. And this leads us to our next point, which entered the equation: Ubereats Boost. With carriers having to have the added burden of bringing the food up to the customer when they previously could just stay in their car was obviously a big problem. There were instances where carriers not only had a problem with this, but they just wouldn't do it. They would call the customer and let them know that they're outside, and if they did not come down to pick up the food, well, the customer just wouldn't receive the food. Ubereats' response to this was to come up with what's known as Ubereats Boost Zones. A boost zone is an added percentage to your per mile rate in your market. So you may see boost zones of 1.2, 1.3, 1.1, etc. And it's just 1.1 will be 10%, 1.2 is 20%, 1.3 is 30%, etc. So let's say your market pays $1 per mile. You're in a 1.1 boost zone. That means that your boost would be 10%. So any order within that boost zone would pay $1.10 per mile. This made up for the fact that since customers could not tip you, well, the boost would make up for that tip because you would still be getting the money even if it wasn't directly from the customer, which made up to the fact that, well, we used to didn't have to do this at all. At least with these boost zones, we're still getting a little something out of it. But it's a mixed bag because these boost zones are isolated in certain areas of your market with the most demand. So if you weren't in that boost zone, you were having to still do extra work with no additional costs. On top of this, these boost zones were designed to even out the score with these other apps like Postmates and DoorDash, Amazon, etc. that didn't necessarily have boost zones, but they had it so that customers could tip their carriers inside the app, making it very convenient, and these apps encourage tipping. Overall, people saw this as it would balance it out, but this brought about another problem that Ubereats had to tackle. Since Ubereats is available to anyone who drives UberX like myself, this creates two types of carriers. They're the people who are what I call dual platformers, people who drive for rideshare and delivery, and people who drive just on the Ubereats system. Because of car limitations, or they don't want to deal with people, whatever the situation is, their account is just for Ubereats. So this creates a dynamic where one group always gets overvalued over the other. This takes a form in different boosts and different quests being sent out to these different groups. Because let's say if a city does not have enough Ubereats only drivers, well then they'll be offering more boosts and incentives to the dual platformers. Let's say on the flip side, there are plenty of Ubereats only drivers. They won't offer any boosts or incentives to the dual platformers. So you have this cat and mouse situation where, based on what's going on, which one has the most value at any given time in the year? Because there are times where obviously UberX is going to be busier than others. So Uber will put the boost zones on the Eats only because they know the dual platformers will have their hands full with UberX, excuse me. And then you get a situation where on the flip side, UberX is going to be slow based on lack of airport rides, business conferences, etc. So they want the UberX crowd to pick up the slack for what's lacking on Ubereats, and they will put the boosts and incentives there instead of putting them on the Eats platform. This creates a pretty big divide because throughout certain times of the year, you get this dynamic where, okay, one group is going to be valued over the other, but the other is always strung out, which always leaves the danger that, well, they're going to stop driving for Uber Eats altogether for one reason or another. And that leads to the next issue that had to be addressed. The recent changes sparked a movement where the dual platformers or the Eats only fleet would be upset. One would always get overvalued over the other, and the changes that came later down the line just widened that gap. Around this time, the original CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, officially resigned due to workplace politics. And because of this, Uber took advantage of the situation to call for what they call the 180 days of change, in which they expressed their love and value of the drivers. In this time, the tipping platform officially came out for Uber, and likewise Uber Eats. This in turn made Uber Eats earnings potentially rival that of rideshare earnings, making certain rideshare drivers who hadn't looked at it in the first place begin to slowly consider it. This effectively balanced both the dual platformers and the Eats only, as you had a fleet that was keeping up with the customer demand as far as how many drivers were needed in a given location to satisfy the customer demand. However, eventually the customer demand started to grow more than both the fleet and the dual platformers. This led to Uber Eats reworking the whole structure of the algorithm. It used to be that you wouldn't get anything past 5 miles away, and you had to accept over 80% of your orders, otherwise you risked deactivation off the Uber Eats platform. Once they restructured it, because drivers were not happy with that, they would just not get on the platform altogether, they expanded it so that there was no longer an acceptance rate, but the algorithm could now reach literally across 9 or 10 miles if necessary. The algorithm was restructured so that it would start small and gradually start expanding to pull drivers from all over the place. This is where requests started coming 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away, etc. As you can imagine, drivers, whether you're dual platformers or Uber Eats only, aren't going to take some that's 8 or 9 miles away. And this led into the next issue that had to be resolved. And this sparked the beginning of all these changes that were really necessary. No matter what Uber does, at the end of the day, they need both carriers, both types of carriers. They need the Eats only fleet, but they also need the dual platformers. Because anytime one is deficient, the other one serves as the backbone. But they're not treating them equally, so by definition, if you don't have a strong backbone, the system's going to break. And this led to what Uber calls these undeliverable orders. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why they call them undeliverable, but these are basically orders that have gone past that time guarantee that they were known for and that they've guaranteed customers. See, all businesses have a unique tactic that outshadows their competition in one way or another. And Uber Eats became known for that time guarantee. It would always, right on the dot, be within the time frame that the app was given. But because of the situation that I just described, you had situations where orders would just float out there and people were not taking them. You had situations where you would have orders be literally 15 or 20 minutes away because the algorithm is trying to pull drivers from another side of the city because no one is taking them close by. If you imagine, not too many carriers, based on whatever situation, are going to go 10 miles just go pick up some food and take it around the corner. So this became the scenario where these undeliverable orders came into play. And Uber Eats had to take a step back and reevaluate their whole system. So Uber had quite a dilemma on their hand. On one hand, they need to maintain that time guarantee because that's what they're known for. And on the other hand, they had to convince us as carriers, whether we're dual platformers or fleet only, to pick these orders up. And obviously that was not happening. They were wrapping the boost zones around areas, and they even added the tipping option, but for some reason, that scenario that they wanted was not happening. So they had to take a big look at their overall setup for Uber Eats, because the expansion on the customer end was growing faster than their current system's ability to handle these situations. And in taking the overall look at what was working and what was not working, here's where the birth of these changes that a lot of carriers don't too much care for came into play. Even as we speak today, Uber Eats brings Uber more money than any other platform at this particular time. That includes UberX, Uberpool, UberXL, Uber Select, Uber makes more money off of Uber Eats than a lot of other platforms that they have. With that taken into consideration, you can obviously see why they have to act quickly before they lose some of the market share that they worked so hard to obtain. So, in order to do this, they had to start cutting back on things while introducing features that will incentivize carriers to pick up these undeliverable orders or just incentivize them to take them in the first place. And here we have the changes that led us to 2018, where we are now. As we stand, there are no more wait time fees. Wait time fee would be if you waited in an area longer than 15 minutes, then you would get compensated for your wait time in various markets. In most markets it was $5, but some markets didn't offer wait time fee. As we stand now, there are no more wait time fees. Uber made the announcement that they would start paying for what's known as wait time, which is their way of kind of combining wait time with your overall trip, because they pay on a per minute basis, and it's a brief estimate based on traffic and other conditions. They also lowered the drop off, lowered the pickup, and in a lot of markets lowered the per mile rate in order to give us this quote unquote wait time. Now, in the grand spectrum of things, a lot of people's earnings were not necessarily affected. Some have risen slightly, while others have actually gone down. And this is more of a marketing thing to carriers than it is to make carriers make more money. As it stands, these other companies don't technically pay for wait for time per minute to hold delivery. So it's more of a marketing scheme to kind of incentivize carriers, because they can say to new carriers, hey, we do this, even though you doing this doesn't necessarily mean that we're making more money based on things that you've done. But when you look at the overall system, everything that they've introduced over the last months has been a remaking of the Uber Eats system. We have a new incentive where if an order has extended past that time guarantee we talked about before, a little guarantee pops up before you take in the ping, guaranteeing that you will make a certain amount. Now, these certain amounts usually mean that you may get an additional between 70 cents and $3 for taking that delivery. But they're restructuring this whole thing so that they have a scenario that's enticing you to take this order no matter what the situation is. Think for a moment every scenario. The normal scenario is the ping goes out, but a carrier gets there, it's not ready, they don't wait, they cancel the order. Second carrier comes, maybe it's still not ready, but they wait 5 minutes to take it. Or maybe they leave too. And people just keep, they either come and cancel, or they don't take the order altogether. Once the time extends past that time guarantee, this incentive pops up now saying, hey, we'll give you an extra sum if you take this. And eventually a carrier is going to take it and deliver it at an additional fund to the carrier. So when you look at it, Uber Eats has evolved into a system where no matter the circumstance, they have some way of enticing the driver to take the order. So what does that mean for us as carriers? Ultimately, the Uber Eats system has just evolved based on the time, and us as carriers have to be able to sort through and make the money that we want to make. Because at the end of the day, this new system will have a ripple effect 3 to 6 months later. Because eventually restaurants that take too long are going to become known by us carriers. We're not going to go there. We're going to cancel if we accidentally take it. That's just how it's going to go. The restaurants have to step the game up, or they may potentially get the boot off the platform. And that whole thing will take about 3 to 6 months. But once that dynamic takes place, you will have a system where no matter what the scenario, carriers have the potential to make the same money or even more based on the situation. That's where Uber Eats came from and where we currently are today. As always, if you have any questions, leave them below. A lot of y'all probably have questions as far as, based on these changes, is the Uber Eats course that the Uber Lifestyle put out still valid? I'm happy to tell you that it is. The only thing that's not valid anymore is the wait time. But if they're not paying wait time, you need to avoid certain restaurants. Certain restaurants will have to get it in the picture now that you either have this stuff ready or your carrier's not going to wait around. And that will mean that certain restaurants will have to go through some changes. Some may have to leave the platform altogether. But the end result will be a situation where carriers will ultimately be able to make money depending on whatever situation it is. But it will take you being more seasoned, and you can't just accept anything. You got to be a little choosy. You got to really know your market and be willing to learn it. As always, if you like this video, a like, share, and subscribe is greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, leave them below. This is Elijah. Until the next time, peace out.